Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the bonus edition of the Audacious Living Podcast, where our continued goal is to help you live your best audacious life ever. Of course, you can stay connected to us through our social media platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and you can subscribe to any of our channels to keep the conversation going. As well, speaking of subscribing, you can click that subscribe button below if you're watching on YouTube, and that will be up to speed with any new content that comes through our YouTube channel as well. On this episode, again, this bonus episode, we're talking about the pandemic, and it's still something very real that we're all collectively dealing with it. And we know how the impacts are far-reaching from a mental and physical health standpoint. We know what's happening in the business community, as well as the pressure that's being put on families. There are all sorts of schools of thoughts on how the government should be dealing with the pandemic. We all know about the lockdown orders, whether businesses should be allowed to remain open or not. That's a big bone of contention because it's affecting people's livelihoods. So I totally get it. I recognize what's at stake here. So as we continue to navigate through the pandemic, I thought it would be a good opportunity to get the perspective of a local business, to hear how things are happening from their perspective and how they're managing and dealing with the pandemic. Akmal Farah owns and operates Authentic Taekwondo studio in the northern part of Toronto, and and on a side note, he just happens to have the distinction of being the former team captain of the Canadian National Taekwondo team. So that's kind of cool, and a cool little feather, something to put in his belt, if you will, under his black belt. He's on the program to share his thoughts and provide his perspective as a local business owner, and you'll get an opportunity to hear about the pivots that he's had to make throughout the pandemic. The other thing that he'll touch on is the impacts that it's having on our children from a mental health standpoint. And as a Taekwondo instructor, he works with a lot of children directly. So he's able to see and offer up a perspective that many of us will find interesting. It really is an insightful conversation that definitely will open up your eyes. So without further ado, let's turn to Akmal. Enjoy. The impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic has been far-reaching, and Akmal Farah of Authentic Taekwondo joins the podcast to offer his viewpoints on how our children are being negatively affected from a mental health standpoint. The former Canadian National Taekwondo champion will also talk about the pivots that needed to be made as instructional classes and sessions moved online. This and more up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. I think the timing of reaching out, and even the topic of mental health, it's an important one. So I'm glad that you did so.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. You know what? I think we're all affected by this pandemic in one way or another. This is I think in the very first time in a long time, there's different sides to this, and everybody's right. There's a side that says, let's consider everybody's well-being and do a huge lockdown. And they're absolutely right. We have to consider people's health and well-being. But then there's also the other side that are considering people's economic well-being. The businesses, that's people's livelihood as well. And that affects people's well-being as well.
Absolutely.
And they're right too. So, which side you want to be on, it's really tough to say that, what, you don't have a right to say that.
It's a fair question. Akmal, let's kind of go back and sort of, you sort of talked about how this is something that was important to you, and especially amongst children. So let's kind of go back and maybe give a bit of context as to where it started for you, in terms of why this topic is of significance or importance.
So I have a martial arts school. I teach a lot of children. So the base, the foundation of a lot of martial arts school is the children. Obviously, we have an adult program as well, but I would say over 70% of our students are children. We also teach at schools. We go into private schools, public schools, and we work with children there as well. One is obviously it's great foundation for them because we teach them the fundamentals of respect and discipline and perseverance and hard work, but at the same time getting them physically active, physically fit. So we work with them a lot before this pandemic, and obviously when the pandemic hit, a lot of kids were basically just learning online, and then they were really affected by this. So when we first went into online in March, we were just working in person. Obviously, I know my students very well. And then things started to open up a little bit once the weather got better. And we saw a lot of our students in person. And believe me, those 4 or 5 months of change and being stuck at home, we saw a significant difference in their behavior, in their kind of like how they interacted with others in public settings. Usually we have a test indoors before the pandemic of 40, 50 people. And obviously with the parents and everybody being there, you can have at least 100 people there. So some of these kids, obviously they're nervous, they're anxious, but they perform amazingly despite those obstacles. But once the pandemic hit, and then we had the same thing, we actually held a test outside. We still have a large group of people, but everybody was dispersed. But just having those people outside, having these kids all of a sudden being in a big setting like that amongst people, they couldn't concentrate. The concentration was one of the main things that was affected. They were busy looking at all these people that were there because they hadn't been in a large group setting in such a long time. So we saw firsthand some of these effects of these things.
You know, what's interesting, Akmal, is I that's not something I would have necessarily clued in on right away as what we would see as one of the outcomes, if you will, like in terms of, you know, how we think this would be affecting people, like in social settings, because now you almost have to sort of relearn a little bit of how you interact with others socially.
Absolutely. So, you know, I work with obviously a lot of children, but I also talk to a lot of parents, and the parents are like, well, you know, we want to send our 3-year-old to daycare because we want her to learn to share with other kids. But you can't teach that right now because sharing is not allowed. You know, we want to teach our kids to interact with other kids, but you know, what kind of interaction takes place is also significant. So these are some of the things that we didn't even think about before pandemic. We encourage our children to share their toys, to share their books, to share. But now it's like, no, you're not allowed to share. So a child that is just learning those valuable lessons now, how is that going to implement them later? And then it's like, am I allowed to share? Am I not allowed to share? It's like something you should be like scared to make a decision.
Well, again, I mean, you know, you think when we were kids, we always talked about, you know, playing in the sandbox and sharing, and those things were able to happen because of the social interactions that were allowed to happen. You take that away, and those simple, where many of us would think basic lessons, those opportunities to practice them. So it's one thing to learn them. We also have to practice them. And you know, as a Taekwondo instructor, you know the importance of practice. And when you don't have that opportunity, that takes it away, and you know, the learning is affected.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's tough, but obviously, you know what, the maybe the positive outcome of that is that children are interacting with their parents a lot more. And so before they decide to, you know, share something, they always ask their parents, you know, can I share this with the other child? Or the other child goes and asks their, you know, hopefully that lesson is learned, that they have to go and ask their parents, like, Mom, Dad, is it okay if I you know, share this little car with Bobby or something like that? So that interaction maybe replaces that, but at the same time, just the fundamental values of interacting, playing freely, you know, not being afraid to be on a jungle gym with other kids, being on a swing, touching the same areas that another child may have touched. These are like, you know, obviously it is the reality of the situation, but it affects kids. It affects kids, whether they should even be talking to other kids, you know, being around other kids.
Social distancing, all those things. Yeah, yeah. Out of curiosity, were there any sort of other things that you noted within children that in terms of how they're being affected and how it may impact in terms of impacting their mental health?
Absolutely. So obviously in Taekwondo, we work a lot on, developing speed and power and kicking. So when we're teaching on Zoom, we definitely focus on technique. We want to make sure kids are extending their leg properly, getting good flexibility. But the ability to hit, solid, doing solid kicks, that is gone. So obviously, because a lot of them are just kicking the air now, they're just moving around, kicking and punching the air. So the ability to build strength is gone. The ability for them, and I think maybe even the ability that mental strength, because some of the things that they're faced with in person when they're facing another person in a classroom setting, they're being challenged, they're being pushed around, they're being kicked around. So they have to react and kind of like overcome that. Obviously, everything is at beginner level, advanced, and so on. But when we brought kids, especially kids who are just starting out on Zoom and never had done martial arts before, we realized that there's a significant difference in their power level because they don't really have anything to hit. And obviously, it takes a lot more investment to buy proper training equipment at home, like the stand-up kicking bags and the punching bags. So that is another thing that's affected. And then obviously, I feel like maybe we've missed the point of what martial arts is supposed to be, which is like, teaching self-defense. At the core value of it, martial arts was built as a form of self-defense. Now, obviously, we're doing a lot more like lectures, talking to kids about the principles of martial arts. But that concept of like defending yourself, being pushed around, being kicked, that's another aspect that's missing. So it's hard for us to teach that. How do you teach someone timing of being punched or kicked if there's no one really to challenge them?
Understood. What is this doing to their confidence, Akmal?
Great question. I think maybe I hope I'm wrong, but I think maybe there's an inflated sense of confidence that's being built by Zoom. But I think maybe as teachers, we have an obligation to let students know that this is not really a self-defense class that you're learning right now. Just because you're learning to kick and punch, it doesn't mean that you have all the tools right now to be going out there and defending yourself. Now, obviously, fights rarely happen, if ever. But still, we really discourage any kind of confrontation whatsoever. But I think, maybe having that confidence to be physically fit and physically active and to be well aware of your surroundings, knowing your right versus, like slouching down and like unsure of themselves. Most likely you're going to invite bullies and things like that when you're walking a certain way. So if we can maybe fix their posture, fix their physical fitness, make sure that they're getting enough exercise daily, I think we can help them in that way.
I think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of the feedback piece is also important, right? So you talked about, for example, the strength of your kicks. Well, if someone's not there letting you know to say to kick harder, let's say, you're not getting that in feedback from as an instructor would give you to let you know if you need to apply more force or what have you. Would that be a fair sort of piece when we talk about another downside of learning online?
Absolutely, Audley. You're absolutely right. It's tough because when we're teaching on Zoom, the other problem is that these kids are kings of their own castles, kings and queens of their own castles.
Right.
So when they do, let's say, 10 reps of a certain activity and they're tired, their couch is like just around the corner. They go and lie down on their couch. Right. So it's hard, even though we may give them feedback and be like, you know what, Bobby, get up, you can do it again. You know what, that choice is really theirs. They're not at the studio where we can say like, no, you have to stand up, you have to keep going. They make the rules at their own home. But what we try to do is we ask the parents to be there with us. Please sit close by so that you're also kind of reinforcing some of the things that we're saying. So there's we've learned a lot when we first started online classes. Obviously, when we started class, it was just a big mumbo jumbo.
Sure.
But as time went by, we learned a lot.
Sure.
Number one of the first lessons we learned is that, like I said, please make sure the parents, you're sitting with your kids to make sure that you're guiding them alongside with us. Obviously, we're guiding them as well. We can see them, but just having that reinforcement helps a lot. Number two, if we can see the kids from head to toe, it helps us a lot more because we can give better feedback to the children. So for example, if they're kicking, punching straight, their hand is not slouching or their hand is not open, make sure your hand is closed properly. We can give those feedbacks. When they're kicking, their legs is stretched out, we can give good feedback. Sometimes we can only see like the forehead, so it's like, it's hard for us to interact when we don't have feedback, and usually kids lose interest because of that. The next thing is we always ask parents, please make sure you have enough space in your living room, because if they're bumping into things, injuries happen and they get discouraged a lot. So having enough space in your living room or basement or wherever they're exercising from, it's important. The third thing that we always emphasize is please make sure that you put us on a minimum on a laptop. And if you can actually hook it up to a TV, it really helps a lot. It's the next best thing to an actual setting, because your kids can see all their fellow students, all the instructors on a big screen TV, and they can pick and choose who they want to emulate. And 90% of our students are really active. They're really going. Obviously, some kids are kind of like apprehensive. They don't really jump in right away.
Yep.
But having that big screen TV is the next best thing to being in an actual dojo or dojang setting, martial arts setting where people are kicking and punching.
With so much, obviously everything's had to go online, and we know kids are learning online all the time. I'd imagine this presents some real challenges, because at some point, there's just enough screen time, if you will. I remember it wasn't all that long ago that parents talked about, limiting their screen time. And now, we've got to slightly change that message, because everything is put online and kids are in front of their screens all the time. That must present some real challenges for you, just generally be able to teach and to instruct kids.
You're absolutely right. So I think when we first meet some parents, they're a little hesitant to sign their kids up for another online class. So it's really understandable. But the good thing is that unlike academic settings, we ask our students to turn their cameras on. It's important for us to see them, because that creates engagement. Number two, we're not just a screen where they're playing around on the screen. They're actually doing jumping jacks and push-ups and sit-ups. So they're being active while they're following along. So our classes are an average 30 to 45 minutes.
Right.
And that's 30 to 45 minutes of quick exercise, creating endorphins, feeling good, getting a good exercise, expending energy, and then you feel good, and then you could do whatever it is that you want. You want to go and read a book, you want to go and have dinner, take a bath, whatever it is you want to do, you have your own free time to do that. Right. But it's not a normal screen time where just, you're staring into the screen, maybe dozing off and not really unsure of what's going on. Right. We are encouraging kids to be active. Come on, you could do 5 more push-ups, 10 more push-ups, and then we teach them the basic kicks, a lot of kicking. Yep. And believe me, you know what? I teach 30 minutes in the morning for adults, yep, and I do a lot of children's classes in the evening. And every class you're burning between 300 to 500 calories. So that's you're expending a lot of energy in every single class. And heart rate goes up, a maximum of 180. We really get kids going. It's not just sitting around, but we also focus on meditation. So at the end of every class, we take some time and we teach kids to just sit down and learn to breathe, close your eyes, and focus on your breathing. So eliminating a lot of thoughts. And obviously kids will become fidgety, start to scratch their hair. Sure. We tell them this is also a test of your discipline. Can you sit still for 1 minute without moving, having your eyes closed, even though the urge to want to open your eyes and look around? Can you do that? So we feel like this program is really helping kids, even though they're not in an actual martial arts setting.
Yep. As you're talking, the word discipline comes to mind, and how important that is. Now, discipline, you touched on earlier, is very important and key to being successful in martial arts. But it would appear to me now it's even that much more vital than it ever was before. Is that fair to say, Akmal?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope I'm answering your question correctly, and you can let me know if I'm not. I think it's an important subject to discuss. Discipline, I think if we want to succeed in anything in life, we need discipline. And for children, we tell them, going to bed on time is a test of your discipline. Even though you want to stay up and watch your TV shows and play your video games and do whatever, getting enough rest is an important part of your discipline. We teach them that eating your vegetables, eating the food that your mom and dad cook for you is an important part of your discipline, because even though you may not like it, that's the best food there is. When you go out and eat fast food and eat junk, like literally that's what it is. It's junk food, but all the nutrients that you need to grow a healthy and strong body, you need those nutrients. That's another test of your discipline.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is a test of your discipline, but, and then we go back to a time like this where, even as adults, our discipline is being tested. We are supposed to social distance. We are supposed to keep apart. We are supposed to stay away from loved ones. Our friends and family that we love so much, we are supposed to stay away from them. Yep. This is a real test of our discipline. We have to do something to try and hold this virus back. And this is the real test of our discipline. So it's easy for us to be like, you know what? It's okay. Maybe this time it's okay. And that's where discipline lacks, right? Where we're like, it's okay this one time, but no. Discipline is being consistent in something that you want to do to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And we know that as adults, if we want to be successful at things, discipline is about consistently doing the same thing over and over again until we achieve what we want and not give up.
You got it. No, I 100% agree with you, and I see that, and it's a challenge for people, obviously, and these are different times, but I think we have to hold the line and be firm with what we're doing here. Akmal, I would imagine that you've learned a lot of new things, a new way of doing things, versus at the start of the, say, pandemic versus where you're at now. Are there one or two things that you have had to done differently because of learnings and figuring things out as we go through this first time situation pandemic for many of us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've learned to pivot quickly. If something, if our goal is to get from point A to point B, we all had a certain way of doing business, right? We taught martial arts in a certain way, and just being on Zoom and teaching on Zoom is a new way of doing things. I've learned how to interact on Zoom better. I've learned how to become more tech savvy. So just finding new ways of doing things, not being stuck in there's only one way to do it. I think that's the problem, or the old way of doing things. We have to, and I think we all know that maybe theoretically, but this is a time where everything is being put into practice.
Gotcha.
How are you going to reinvent yourself? How are you going to find new ways to get clients? Now people can't walk into your studio anymore and ask for membership and all that stuff.
Yep.
New ways of marketing, advertising, the online marketing, getting yourself out there more, being, not being camera shy, standing out there and really presenting yourself. And it's okay to have flaws. It's okay, it's okay to once in a while break your discipline, being okay with that, not being so hard on yourself. I think a lot of times when we say, eat properly, and then once in a while we break free of that, and it's like, oh man, and then we beat ourselves up more and make ourselves feel worse because we broke that discipline. So I think being balanced, there's a whole lot of stuff that was theoretical. We were just kind of like coasting before. Just things were just normal. Obviously, we were struggling, rushing from A to B. Life was moving very fast.
Yep.
Life has slowed down. We're reflecting a lot more.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of things that were theoretical are now put into practice. And I think one thing that has really, I would like to point out is a lot of people are like, practice, do as I say. But this is a time where we have to practice what we preach. We're all on the brinks of tough times, and we don't know what's going to happen, but we can't give up. This is something that we always tell our students, like, hey, you know what? You're running fast, you fall down, get back up. 5-year-old, 6-year-old, they sit there and they're crying, but we're like, no, you got to be strong. You got to get back up. But this is the time where we look at ourselves and say, well, we're having a hard time. Are we going to stay there and feel sorry for ourselves? Or are we going to keep going?
Got you. I think that's a great message. I want to ask one last question before I let you go, and I really appreciate you spending this time and sharing with us and really enlightening in terms of sort of things that you're seeing. Because, to be honest, it's not something I would have necessarily thought about in terms of challenges, but as you describe them and articulate them, I get it. It's real, not only for just for our young people, for their parents and you as an instructor. But I'm just wondering, before we go, if you could, and I'm sort of thinking ahead here, because sooner or later this pandemic is going to end and things are going to get back to normal. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, are there some things that are going to be changed moving forward? Like, are there aspects that you may never go back to, or are there things that will now be instituted as part of your regular practice moving forward?
Absolutely. So I think we just got pushed into the future at a much faster rate. I never thought that I would be teaching online, yelling and screaming at a computer, like, come on, 5 more, it's like a crazy person. But the truth is that that's the reality of it now. We got pushed into the future, and now we have to live in the future. So I don't think we will ever get rid of this online classes. But what I think is amazing, oddly, is that the fact that we can learn from people around the world right now, because everybody's online now. So if you were this amazing instructor that was only doing things at a certain location, now you're not restricted to that location. Now you can go online and teach a whole bunch of stuff. So there is national team coaches, incredible instructors and coaches and teachers and professors who are out there teaching their passion that they've been practicing for so many years. And you know what the amazing thing is? They're putting it for a fraction of the price that they were teaching in person, because people need to survive. Right. So I think this is really a great opportunity for people to be able to learn from somebody in Africa, learn from somebody in Europe, you learn from somebody in and obviously those things exist on YouTube, there's videos, but now you can actually interact with people live from Asia and South America and all over the place. Now, obviously there's a time difference, but if you want that, if you've always wanted to visit Japan and learn from a Japanese master, you can do that now. And you just have to find that. I myself, I'm a former national team coach. I'm a former national team athlete. And, I was restricted to only Markham location, but I'm open to reaching as many people as possible. Now I have students from Montreal. We are working with people in Africa to try and get them to, there's a 6-hour, 7-hour time difference, but we can work with them. So we're arranging a way to maybe find the time that works best for them and for us, just to get them to get fit and exercise. And some of them are living in villages and stuff like that, but that's no longer an issue. We can work together and get them to stay active. So I think the online portion of it will stay forever. I think maybe, some martial arts are going to have a hard time and really, really struggle, like jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is all about grabbing. Judo is all about grabbing. And I think those martial arts are going to have a really hard time in trying to last this pandemic. Right.
Well, I think those are some great points, Akmal. Things that we talk about learnings, things that we'll take away and be better for it, I think. And I think those are some positive ones. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate you sharing today as well. You've certainly provided me with some enlightenment and some things that I had never put any real thought into now, but I've certainly increased that awareness. So thank you so much. I wonder for our listeners, if you wanted to just share, or if they wanted to connect with you, or or maybe jump onto one of your online learning opportunities, how could they go about doing that?
They can definitely just, search Authentic Taekwondo. And we are located obviously in Markham, but we do have a website. We do have a Zoom classes. And obviously our email and our phone number and everything is on there. They can contact me anytime. I'd be more than happy to share whatever I've learned with them. And I've really enjoyed this conversation with you today, Audley. Thank you for having me on your show. It's been an honor to be your guest. And I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for making the time, Akmal. Take care and all the best.
All the best. Have a great day.
Much thanks to you, Akmal, for joining us on another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. Certainly appreciated hearing your perspective and your viewpoints. And to our listeners, I would encourage you to check out his website. Maybe, check out AuthenticTaekwondo.com, and you can take an online class. And I'm something I might check out myself. Anyhow, that's it for me. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being here for this special bonus edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. Be sure to visit bestaudaciouslife.com. That's the brand new website we set up, and it's a great way to catch up on any past episodes that you may have missed. And just keep connected. Until next time, be safe, be kind, show love to others, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.